Hello and welcome, my dear adventurers. Tonight, as the rain falls against the window, we gather once more to speak of an ancient tale, the tale of dark souls. So find your seat, steady your breath, and listen well. For this is a story of godhood and calamity, of the endless cycle of rise and fall, of light and dark, life and death. Long ago, before memory, before time itself took its first step, the world was but a half-formed dream, a canvas painted in shades of gray. Vast and silent, it was a realm draped in mist, where great arch trees, ancient beyond reckoning, sank their roots deep into the newborn earth. Their towering forms stood watch over a land of stone and shadow. And in that ageless stillness, the everlasting dragons held dominion, unchanging and eternal. Then came a spark. Fire awoke from nowhere, tearing through the stillness and shaping the world with its breath. With it came disparity, the first difference between heat and cold, light and dark, life and death. And from the flame's heart emerged fragile beings, drawn like moths to its warmth. Within the first fire lay the Lord's souls, potent fragments of great power. The Witch of Izalith claimed one. Nito, first of the dead, claimed another. The mighty Lord Gwyn took one for his own. Yet there was another, strange and profound, cloaked in shadow. This was the dark soul, found by the furtive pygmy, the one who would give rise to mankind, though his name is now forgotten. Empowered by these souls, Gwyn and his allies rose against the everlasting dragons. Yet the dragon's stone scales were nearly impervious. Seeking an edge, Gwyn turned to the descendants of the furtive pygmy. From the depths of the abyss, humanity's tools and weapons were wrought in shadow. But the boundless power of darkness stirred fear in Gwyn's heart, and he sealed their creations with fire, trying to contain what he could not understand. In this way, the children of the abyss became pawns, their courage unrecognized, their sacrifices unseen, a testament to Gwyn's dread of the encroaching dark. The war raged across the world, a tempest of stone and flame. For every dragon that fell, 3 of Gwyn's own were lost. Yet fortune turned toward the gods when Seath the Scaleless, a pale dragon born without the gift of stone, betrayed his kin. He revealed the secret of their immortality, the truth hidden within their scales, and their weakness to lightning. Armed with this knowledge, Lord Gwyn and his knights unleashed a storm of golden bolts. The everlasting dragons fell, one by one, and at last the gods stood victorious. The great dragons fell, leaving only tales of their reign, and thus the Age of Fire was born. Life flourished beneath the brilliance of the sun. The gods raised grand civilizations that reached toward the sky. Gwyn built the shining city of Anorlando, eternal and radiant, where light lingered as if it would never fade. As a reward for his treachery, Gwyn granted Seath a fragment of his own Lord's soul and dominion over the Grand Archives, where the pale dragon would pursue his maddening quest for true immortality. Yet even the brightest flame must dwindle, and all golden ages find their twilight. Slowly, the fire that nourished Gwyn's age began to wane. The world trembled on the brink of an age of darkness, a profound shadow that Gwyn now dreaded more than any foe. For he saw its truth. In such an age, humanity would rise, its essence intertwined with the dark. The pygmies, forgotten once, would perhaps stand as gods in this burgeoning night, for their very souls were spun from its fabric. Desperate, the gods sought any means to turn back the encroaching tide. The first desperate solution came from the Witch of Izalith and her loyal daughters of chaos. With a powerful soul and boundless ambition, they dared to rekindle the first flame itself. But in their attempt to play the creator, something fractured. The flame they conjured was not the gentle warmth they sought, but a monstrous, untamed fire, the flame of chaos. The witch and her daughters fought to contain this raging inferno. Amidst this struggle, one of them, Quilana, slipped away from her kin and her daunting task. It is said she would return in ages yet to come, seeking solace or answers, but the true purpose of her journey remains shrouded in mist. For how long they wrestled with that maddened fire cannot be truly said, but chaos, by its nature, refuses all chains. In time, the fervent flame consumed its would-be masters, engulfing the witch and her daughters, and with them, all of Izalith crumbled into ash. Some of her loyal kin and followers were twisted, their forms warped into monstrous demons. Others, by some cruel twist of fate, seemed untouched, while still others vanished. As for the witch herself, her fate is told in many forms. Some believe she became the very heart of the disaster, the abhorrent bed of chaos from whose wretched womb new demons were forever spawned. Others say her powerful soul was utterly devoured, leaving only the bed as a terrible monument. And some still hold to the fragile hope that she simply slipped away, lost to the wider world. The truth remains forever veiled, a secret held by the embers. But the failure at Izalith only deepened the twilight of the gods. The dark's encroachment was not stayed, drawing ever closer to Gwyn and his kin as their hopes grew thin. With a heart turned more towards his own salvation than that of humanity or the pygmy lords, Gwyn devised a final, desperate manipulation. To the pygmy lords, he offered grand crowns and a magnificent city at the very edge of the world, the Ringed City. He even entrusted them with his youngest daughter, Filianor, though he promised to return when the time was ripe. Yet, this splendid gift was but a gilded cage, a place of banishment for the dark soul, meant to sever its power and keep it forever distant. Perhaps in his fading glory, Gwyn truly believed this act would save them all, and in its own sorrowful way, perhaps it did. And so, a fervent devotion was born known as the Way of White. It was a church, or perhaps a cult, dedicated to the preservation of Gwyn's Age of Fire by any means necessary. This faith gained widespread influence, becoming the dominant belief in the land, even among humanity. In the shadow of Gwyn's cunning, mankind found themselves entwined in his illusion. Perhaps they never sought their own power, or perhaps they remained unaware of its slumbering presence. Still, some among humanity sensed the potential within them, their souls yearning for its awakening. But the pygmy lords, content in their isolation, remained within their grand walls at the world's end, holding the dark soul captive at Gwyn's bidding. The essence of the dark soul, however, flows through all of humanity, whether as a gift from the furtive pygmy or as the very truth of their being. And like chaos, the dark could not be contained forever. With Izalith lost to chaos and monstrous demons spreading like a blight, Gwyn faced another great conflict. He gathered his silver knights and descended into the blighted lands, determined to extinguish the demonic threat. The length of this war is unknown, nor is it clear how long the demons festered before Gwyn brought his might against them. It is said they formed their own civilizations with a hierarchy of kings and princes. Yet even Gwyn's splendor was no match for the raw power of chaos. His silver knights, once gleaming, were scorched black, and failing to vanquish the demons, he was forced to retreat. Gwyn's time was running out. The age of dark was dawning, and his fire had flickered almost to embers. He understood the desperate measures he must take. First, with a foresight born of sorrow, he divided the pieces of his powerful soul among those he trusted, including a portion for the 4 kings of New Londo. Then, commanding his people to shepherd humanity, and with no other path remaining, he journeyed with his remaining knights to the kiln of the first flame. It was there that Gwyn, the First Lord, offered himself to the dying embers. Using his body as kindling, he immolated himself, a sacrifice to reignite the first flame and prolong his age of fire. In that act, he placed the same seal of fire once laid upon humanity's abyss-forged weapons upon the dark soul itself, bringing forth the affliction known as the undead curse upon all mankind. Humans were marked with the dark sign, a cursed symbol that branded them undead. They were fated to a tragic immortality, reborn after each death. With every return, they shed more of their humanity until none remained, and they fell into the vacant horror of hollowing. Their minds gone and their selves lost, every flicker of their human soul was extinguished, save for the bitter gift of life itself. The age of fire was restored, but Gwyn, the once mighty god, was now a hollowed husk, the First Lord of Cinder, forever bound to the kiln in an eternal vigil over the first flame. The Way of White, recognizing the threat posed by the undead and remembering Gwyn's command to shepherd humanity, initiated great hunts. They herded the undying into desolate asylums, places where they would endure and await the world's slow, inevitable end. Not every undead, however, was imprisoned. At this time, 2 primordial serpents, ancient beings of unknown origin, began to act. The first was named Koth, Little is known of these serpentine ancients, but their name speaks of forgotten eons. Koth made his way to the city of Ulasil, a place renowned for its golden sorceries. Far beneath its gleaming spires lay the forgotten tomb of the primeval man, Manus. As a champion of the dark, Koth held no belief in Gwyn's fading age of fire. He sought instead the Chosen One, the Dark Lord, who would usher in a true age of dark. Koth persuaded the people of Ulasil to awaken the primeval man. In their attempt, they drove Manus into a maddened frenzy until his humanity shattered and raged uncontrollably as he endlessly sought his precious pendant. Perhaps it was the last anchor to who he was, or to one he loved. It is said that a powerful human will, whether born of love or envy, sees no other path, driving madly towards its goal despite the tragic end that awaits. And so Manus became the monstrous father of the abyss. The abyss itself began to spawn from him, a consuming darkness that swiftly threatened to swallow all of Ulasil and eventually the world. As Ulasil began its slow descent, its citizens tainted and twisted into disfigured horrors. Manus seized Dusk, the princess of Ulasil, dragging her into the swirling depths. Koth then turned his gaze to New Londo, where the four kings, who had been granted a piece of Gwyn's soul, held sway. He played an insidious role in their fall, tempting them with the corrupting power of life drain. He guided the creation of the Dark Wraiths, knights once loyal to the four kings, and bestowed upon them the art of life drain, a means to sap the humanity from other souls to preserve their own. The four kings and their Dark Wraiths were to serve the Dark Lord and usher in the Age of Dark, the Age of Man. The Dark Wraiths, it is said, could invade the worlds of others, pilfering their humanity, earning them the name Enemy of Man. The abyss took root in New Londo, as its kings and people willingly embraced the dark. It was here that night Artorias, one of Gwyn's esteemed four knights, made his stand. Artorias had made it his quest to battle the abyss wherever it appeared, renowned for vanquishing dark wraiths. The abyss in New Londo, however, was different from that in Ulasil. While the abyss in Ulasil surged forth from Manus, in New Londo it was a creeping presence. With no conventional means to prevent its spread from tainting the rest of the world, 3 sealers made a choice. They sealed the city by flooding it, believing it was the only way to contain the encroaching darkness. It was a decision that cost countless lives and erased the culture of a grand city. The victims of this deluge now wander the flooded city as ghosts. Knight Artorias then set forth for Ulasil with his loyal wolf companion, Sif. Having forged a covenant with the beasts of the abyss, Artorias wore a ring that allowed him to traverse the endless dark without being consumed. He and Sif descended into the churning abyss to slay Manus and halt its spread. But a hero like Artorias, whose soul had never known darkness, was corrupted by its touch. Before his mind succumbed to the abyss's madness, he used his great shield to erect a protective barrier around Sif, keeping the wolf safe from the engulfing shadows. The mighty Artorias fell to the dark, becoming little more than the creatures he once hunted. Time, however, is convoluted in this world, its threads twisting in peculiar ways. In the ages that followed, the world would sing praises for Artorias, the Abyss Walker, the hero they believed defeated Manus and ended the threat of the Abyss. Yet this was not what transpired. The truth of that event would remain hidden for ages. Back in Anor Londo, the great luminous city, Guinevere, Gwyn's eldest daughter, and the other gods abandoned its hallowed halls. Lord Gwyn was gone. The abyss was spreading across Lordran, and soon the first flame would dim once more. So they fled, though their destination remains unknown. But one god chose to remain, Gwyndolin, Gwyn's youngest son and the god of the dark moon. Gwyndolin was a master of intricate illusions, and though the sun had long set upon Anor Londo, leaving it in a bleak and sorrowful state, he wove his magic to restore the illusion of its former glory. He brought back the shining sun sentinels to stand guard, even crafting an illusory image of his sister Guinevere within the city's heart. All seemed well again in Anor Londo, a facade of light and warmth. And so the Age of Fire endured. For how long, it is not certain. The grand cycle spun once more, the flame's light dimming as it always must, drawing the world back to the precipice of an age of dark. The tale now turns to the northern undead asylum. There, within a cold cell, lay a solitary soul, almost hollow, yet marked by the dark sign, the one who would come to be known as the chosen undead. Through a broken ceiling, a key, a gift from a knight of Astora, fell into their grasp. Released from confinement, this soul wandered the asylum's halls until they met again the very knight who had offered that hope. The knight, gravely wounded, spoke of an ancient prophecy. Thou who art undead art chosen. One day, a soul such as yours shall make a pilgrimage to Lordran, the land of the lords. And with the ringing of the bell of awakening, the very fate of the undead shall be laid bare before you. This dying knight had freed the very soul from the prophecy. The chosen undead pressed on, only to find their path barred by the asylum demon. Upon its defeat, a key was granted, unlocking the great door, but revealing no escape. The asylum stood alone, an isle in a boundless nowhere. Before they could gaze upon the horizon, a colossal crow descended, its shadow vast, and carried the chosen undead away to Firelink's shrine, a place that would become a sanctuary on their arduous journey. At Firelink's shrine, the chosen undead met a firekeeper, a woman bound to the duty of tending the bonfires across Lordran. Each keeper, a living echo of her flame, draws the humanity offered to her, and in this act, her soul is worn thin by the burdens of mankind's essence. The bonfire offered the undead a fragile peace. There, by its warmth, they could offer fragments of humanity to reclaim their own. Within that sanctuary, a crestfallen warrior shared a secret. 2 bells of awakening awaited. one high above in a forgotten cathedral, and the other deep below, in the perilous ruins of Blighttown. The chosen undead embarked on the task to sound the twin bells. One lay guarded by the cathedral gargoyles, its watchful eyes fixed on the sky. The other, deep below, was watched over by Quelog, one of the demon-twisted daughters of the Witch of Izalith. With the toll of the second bell, the massive gates of Sen's fortress groaned open. That treacherous stronghold, a labyrinth of traps and puzzles, stood as the sole path to the city of Anorlando. Before braving Sen's fortress, the chosen undead returned to Firelink's shrine. There they encountered an ancient and peculiar creature, a primordial serpent named Frampt. This serpent, unlike his kin Koth, aligned himself with Lord Gwyn and the Age of Fire, seeking its continuation. Frampt spoke of a kinship with Gwyn, proclaiming it the chosen undead's destiny to succeed him, to link the flickering flame, banish the encroaching dark, and lift the burden of the undead curse. First, he insisted, the chosen undead must journey to Anorlando to retrieve the Lord Vessel. And so the chosen undead turned towards Anorlando through the perilous halls of Sen's fortress. Within its confines, they discovered an imprisoned scholar, Big Hat Logan, and secured his freedom before pressing onward. At the fortress's summit, the path was blocked by a colossal iron golem. After its defeat, the chosen undead was carried aloft over the great walls and into Anorlando itself by bat-winged demons, whose service to the gods remains an untold secret. Within the radiant city of the gods, the chosen undead's quest for the Lord Vessel was challenged by two knights, Ornstein, one of Gwyn's legendary four, and the imposing Smo. With their adversaries vanquished, the path lay open. In the chamber beyond, the chosen undead stood before Guinevere, Gwyn's eldest daughter. They did not know that this vision was an illusion spun by Gwyndolin, Gwyn's youngest son, the god of the Dark Moon. He alone remained in the abandoned city, weaving such deceptions to guide the chosen undead. The illusion of Guinevere, with words echoing Frampt's own, bid the chosen undead, succeed my father and link the flame. Then she bestowed upon them the Lord Vessel, which the chosen undead carried back to Frampt. Frampt then transported the chosen undead to the Firelink altar, instructing them to place the Lord Vessel upon it. The altar stood before a colossal door, the entrance to the kiln of the first flame, and to the fallen Lord of Cinder, Gwyn himself. To unseal the passage, the Lord Vessel needed to be filled with souls of immense power. Frampt bade them retrieve the Lord's soul of the Witch of Izalith, and that of grave Lord Nito, along with the two bequeathed fragments of Gwyn's own soul, held by Seath, the Scaleless, and the four kings of New Londo. On the path to the Duke's archives in Anorlando to claim the soul fragment from Seath, the chosen undead journeyed through the Darkroot Garden. Here, time itself began to twist. Within the garden, the chosen undead freed a woman trapped within a crystalline golem. she revealed herself as Princess Dusk of Ulasile, confessing she was not of this land or this time. Upon reaching the Duke's archives, the chosen undead found the same crystalline golems. From one, a broken pendant entwined with a vine from Ulasile fell. Returning to the garden to seek answers from Dusk, they found instead a tear in the fabric of time. From its depths, a monstrous hand emerged, dragging the chosen undead into its swirling abyss. They awoke in Ulasile, but from an earlier age, the time of Dusk's origin. There, a talking mushroom, Elizabeth, revealed that Dusk had been dragged into the abyss that was consuming Ulasile, captured by Manus himself. The chosen undead resolved to aid Dusk. Their path was first met by Knight Artorias, but he was fallen, corrupted by the dark of the abyss. His mind lost, he was unable to discern friend from foe, striking out in a maddened frenzy. The chosen undead ended his suffering and pressed deeper into the encroaching abyss. At the precipice of the abyss, they found Artorias' loyal wolf companion, Sif, protected within the magical barrier cast by her master's great shield. They cleared the shadows that encircled Sif, allowing the wolf to flee to safety. Deeper still, into the maw of the abyss, the chosen undead finally confronted Manus, the primeval man. After a terrible battle, the chosen undead felled the father of the abyss, halting its spread through Ulasile and saving the world from its creeping tendrils. Thus, the chosen undead, unknown and unlauded, became the true hero of the legends, performing the deeds attributed to Artorias, the Abyss Walker. It was never Artorias who defeated Manus, though the chosen undead would receive no such recognition. They rescued Dusk from the lingering shadows and returned to their proper time. Back in the Duke's archives, the chosen undead found Big Hat Logan once more. Deep in the study of Seath's crystalline sorceries, he revealed the secret to felling Seath. His immortality was tethered to the shimmering primordial crystal. In their grand confrontation with Seath, the chosen undead first shattered that vital crystal. Only then could they claim Seath's life, and with it, the precious shard of Gwyn's soul. Next, their path led them down into the burning ruins of Izalith to dismantle the monstrous bed of chaos and claim the lingering essence of the witch of Izalith's soul. Then, a journey into the silent bone-strewn tomb of giants to face and defeat grave Lord Nito and take his formidable soul as well. Finally, only the last fragment of Lord Gwyn's soul remained, held by the shrouded four kings of New Londo. But to confront them, the chosen undead needed a way to traverse the consuming abyss. The answer lay in Artorias' ring. Yet, it was guarded by a now-grown colossal grey wolf, Sif. Though her ancient eyes still held a flicker of recognition for the one who saved her long ago, her loyalty to her fallen master held her bound to his grave, a sorrowful sentinel. And so the chosen undead, with a heavy heart, brought a tragic end to the loyal wolf, claiming the ring they so desperately needed. With Artorias victorious' ring upon their finger, the chosen undead descended into the abyss, claiming Gwyn's soul from the Four Kings. Their sacred task nearing its end, they returned to the Firelink altar, placing the gathered souls within the Lord Vessel, and thereby opening the solemn path to the kiln. Through the newly opened gates, the chosen undead passed towards the first flame, believing they were poised to mend the fractured world. There at the heart of the kiln sat Gwyn himself before the dying flame. He was but a hollowed husk of the glorious lord he once was, yet his power still lingered, a formidable sorrow. And there the two met in a final somber battle. What Gwyn fought for, perhaps even he had forgotten in his long vigil. But the chosen undead fought to prolong the age of warmth, to lift the heavy burden of the curse from their kin. At the end of their arduous, bloody struggle, the chosen undead stood alone at the kiln of the first flame, standing where the very journey began and where all could finally cease. The first flame, a delicate enigma weaving together peace and despair. With a final selfless act, the chosen undead extended their being to the flame, allowing it to embrace them, to consume their very body and soul as precious kindling, breathing life back into the dying light, thereby extending the age of fire once more. In Drangleic, history is a closed loop. Kingdoms rise from dust, collapse into memory, and are reborn under different names. The death of Manus, father of the Abyss, was not an end but a beginning. His demise shattered a font of dark power, an event that would echo through the ages. His fractured soul gave birth to entities of pure shadow and desire, being steeped in his fragmented will. These children of the dark would become the secret architects of the land's recurring tragedy, whispering ambition into the ears of kings and guiding their magnificent realms toward ruin. Each shard of Manus, a lingering piece of his will, sought a vessel, finding purchase in the hearts of ambitious men who would carve out kingdoms in their own image. All were destined for the same fate. In Shulva, the sanctum city, the slumbering dragon Sin was roused from his rest, poisoning the kingdom with a toxic blight. The Broom Tower became a monument to its creator's hubris, abandoned by the Iron King and left to the lonely vigil of Nadalia, Bride of Ash, a sorrowful echo of Manus's own solitude. And the frozen kingdom of Eliam Lois stands as a testament to loss, its ivory king consumed by the old chaos, leaving another shard, Alsana, to entomb the land in an eternal, protective winter. Countless other domains, like Alaf's, have been lost to time, their existence marked only by the petrified figures of mages who dared to challenge the land's inevitable decay. While most of these rulers faded into obscurity, one king's ambition burned so brightly it seared his name into history, the old Iron King. He began as a minor lord, but his destiny was forged when the swordsman Sir Alan entered his service. Together, they conquered the lands of Ven, a victory that, while costly, led the king to unearth the scorching iron scepter. This artifact granted him mastery over iron, allowing him to raise an impossible fortress from the lava-drenched earth of Earthen Peak. This was the Iron Keep, a symbol of his power. His former bastion, the Broom Tower, was cast aside, a forgotten relic of a humbler past. But the Iron King's ambition, once the forge of his kingdom, would become its funeral pyre. The curse crept into his iron domain like rust, and in his fear, he herded the afflicted into the huntsman's copse, a place where their shared curse was met not with solace, but with cruelty. As his kingdom crumbled, the king's obsession turned from governance to a singular, desperate goal: to forge life from iron, to recreate the golems of a forgotten age. This was a path too dark for his most loyal companion, Sir Alan. Seeing the madness in his lord's eyes, the swordsman departed, his loyalty broken by the king's descent into hubris. Undeterred, the king pressed on, and with the help of the merchant Magarold, he succeeded. He gave birth to the smelter demon, a being of molten iron and unthinking rage. But he could not control what he had made. The automaton became the master of the keep, a walking inferno in its halls. And as if in judgment, the very foundation of the king's power, the Iron Keep itself, began its slow, inexorable descent into the molten earth, a tomb for a king who dared to play God. To speak of Drangleic is to speak of its last true king, for the fate of the land and the man were inseparable. From where he came, history does not say. He arrived in this land of ghosts and fallen thrones as a conqueror with a vision. Vendrick did not come to this land of forgotten crowns alone. At his side stood his brother, the scholar Aldia, and his twin shadows in battle, the loyal Velstadt and the formidable Rame. With their counsel and their might, he did what countless others before him could not. He united the fractured land under a single banner and named it Drangleic. For a time, it seemed the cycle was broken. Under the joint rule of Vendrick the king and Aldia the sage, a true golden age began, a bastion of light built upon the ruins of 1,000 failures. But like all kingdoms before it, Drangleic was fated to receive its own shard of the abyss. She was called Nashendra, a fragment of Manus who embodied his deepest desire. She came to Vendrick cloaked in beauty, and the king, seeing only a queen, took her as his own. With her shadow now cast over the throne, the kingdom began to change. Vendrick's brother, Aldia, saw the queen for what she was, and retreated into the solitude of his keep, not in surrender, but in a desperate search for a way to break the cycle she embodied. Meanwhile, Nashendra whispered in the king's ear, painting visions of a land across the sea, a realm of giants whose power, she claimed, could defy fate itself. Vendrick, now under her spell, eventually led his armies across the ocean. He returned victorious, bearing a prize he would not name. I subdued the giants, he would later claim, and claimed their strength so that I might step closer to fire. This stolen power allowed him to create an army of golems, and with their labor, he he built the monumental Drangleic Castle, a fortress to house his throne and his queen, guarded by the ever-loyal Velstadt. But the victory was a curse in disguise. The surviving giants, fueled by a rage born of loss, crossed the sea in retaliation. Their vengeance was absolute, a war that scarred Drangleic for generations, leaving ruin in their wake. A nameless hero eventually struck down the giant lord, ending the siege, but the war was already lost. Drangleic had won its great victory, only to find its kingdom reduced to ash and bone. The ashes of the giant war had barely cooled when a new plague took root in Drangleic. The undead curse, a silent, creeping pestilence, began to spread. The king's response was brutal and desperate. He sought to excise the rot, tasking the flexile sentry to ship the afflicted to the lost Bastille, and hiring assassins to hunt those who had already gone hollow. While Vendrick waged war on the symptoms, his brother Aldia locked himself away, racing to find a cure. But the curse could not be contained. Their differing philosophies, the king's containment versus the scholar's search for a cause, drove a wedge between them. This schism shattered their brotherhood. In his fear, Vendrick banished the one man who might have found a true answer, sealing Aldia within his own keep. But the curse is indiscriminate. It came for the king himself. As it stripped away his mortality, it granted him a terrible insight. He saw the queen's true face, a shard of the abyss, an embodiment of want, a parasite feeding on his kingdom. He finally understood the nature of the cycle he was trapped in. Knowing he could not defeat her, Vendrick chose another path, exile. He took his last loyal knight, Velstadt, and sealed himself away in the undead crypt, a tomb for a king still living. There, he waited for his mind to unravel, his own hollowing a mirror to the slow death of his kingdom. Drangleic did not fall to giants or foreign invaders. It rotted from within, a victim of a queen's bottomless hunger, and a king who learned the truth of the cycle far too late. Long after the last embers of Drangleic had cooled, the curse claimed another victim. Far to the south, an undead's identity was unraveling, their past dissolving into a fog of forgotten names and faces. This slow erasure of the self led them to a hut of old crones who revealed themselves to be the last fire keepers of a forgotten age. They offered not a cure, but a destination, Drangleic. A land, they said, where souls of immense power might be gathered, enough to anchor a mind on the verge of oblivion. With this sliver of hope, the figure who would become known as the bearer of the curse began their pilgrimage. Driven north by this fading promise, the bearer of the curse walked the razor's edge of sanity, arriving at last at the gateway to the lost kingdom. It was not a grand entrance, but a graveyard of architecture. Yet, amidst the decay, a single tree pulsed with unnatural life, its branches heavy with a swarm of flame butterflies. They took flight, not in chaos, but with purpose, lighting a ring of dead torches. Their glow fell upon a pool of still water, which held not not a reflection of the ruins, but a ghostly afterimage of the kingdom's prime. In the heart of this illusion, a vortex of black water tore itself open. With nothing left to lose, the bearer of the curse plunged into the abyss, a final gamble for a soul already lost. The passage did not lead to Dranglake proper, but to its antechamber, a disorienting realm known as Things Betwixt. The name itself is a clue, for this is a space caught between realities. As its quiet caretaker, the housekeeper Milibeth explains, it is a form of limbo, a threshold separating the dying kingdom from the world outside. Fair traveler, she says, I know that you must have a story. Why else would you visit such a place? This lost, decayed kingdom. Within the lone house of this realm reside the very sisters of the crone who sent the bearer on this quest. They are ancient women, their purpose faded, their garments a uniform of a forgotten duty. Milibeth confirms their past. They were firekeepers, but now, like the world itself, their inner fire is dying. They greet the bearer not with sympathy, but with the hollow laughter of those who have seen countless souls walk this same path to ruin. They see the rot of the curse, the proximity to the final, mindless state of hollowing. Yet, their mockery is a strange form of mercy. They offer a human effigy, an idol said to mirror the true face of its holder. It is a tool of remembrance. By crushing it, the bearer can, for a fleeting moment, push back the encroaching void, recall their name, and reclaim the humanity the curse seeks to devour. It is the first fragile act of defiance in a land built on despair. Clutching the fragile gift of a reclaimed identity, the traveler stepped out of the timeless void of Things Betwixt and into the fading sunlight of Magilla. This seaside settlement, perched on the edge of a cliff, was a final sanctuary for the damned. Here, the crestfallen warrior Salden described it as one of the last places in Dranglake where life felt almost normal, a hub where the cast-offs and the aimless of a broken kingdom eventually washed ashore. It was a place of quiet despair, but a place of rest all the same. It was in this haven of the lost that the traveler met the Emerald Herald, a woman cloaked in green, her purpose as enigmatic as her origins. She would become the fulcrum upon which the traveler's fate would turn. She gave them a name that was both a title and a sentence, the bearer of the curse. It was she who illuminated the path forward, a journey not toward a cure, but through the very heart of the kingdom's suffering. Go, she commanded, and seek the king. Seek Vendrick, who looked into the essence of the soul and built this kingdom. But the path to his throne is barred. The way forward, she explained, was paved with despair. Bearer of the curse, you must seek misery. For in the deepest pits of this land's sorrow, you will find greater, stronger souls. Seek out the four whose names are now unspoken, the inheritors of the great souls of old. Their power will serve as your beacon. Gather them, and then return to me, so that the last embers of hope do not fade from this world. The herald's directive was clear. The path to King Vendrick was not a direct one. It was a pilgrimage into the heart of the kingdom's decay. a hunt for four beings whose names had faded from history, but whose souls still burned with a terrible light. For more specific guidance, the herald pointed not to a sage or a map, but to an impossibly ancient creature dwelling within the ruins of Magilla, an enigmatic cat named Sweet Shalkwar. Her origins were a mystery, but her knowledge was profound. She confirmed the grim journey with a simple, purring question. Are you going to see the old ones? Those four who have grown so incredibly ancient. And so the quest began, leading first into the forest of fallen giants, a vast graveyard that served as a monument to Dranglake's Pyrrhic victory. Here, the past was not buried, it was part of the landscape. The colossal corpses of the giants had taken root, their stone-like forms slowly becoming one with the ancient trees. The battlements of a coastal fortress still stood, though now they were manned only by the mindless, hollowed soldiers who had died defending them. Deep within this fortress, locked away in a subterranean chamber, was a living relic of that war, the last giant. Upon seeing the bearer of the curse, the creature tore itself from its bonds, not with the mindless aggression of a beast, but with a surge of furious recognition. It was as if it saw not just another undead, but the ghost of an old enemy, the face of the one who had brought it to ruin. This violent, sorrowful reaction was a puzzle whose solution lay much deeper within the kingdom's tangled history. The path to the great souls was a journey through the tombstones of failed kingdoms. From the drowned, silent cities of Hyde to the toxic fields of Harvest Valley and the molten slag of the Iron King's ambition, the bearer of the curse trod upon the ruins of ages. This hunt led them to the lost Bastille, the fortress prison Vendrick had established to quarantine the undead ferried from No Man's Wharf. This was a monument to his desperate and ultimately failed war against the curse. Deep within this prison, in a spire known as Sinner's Rise, a singular figure was kept in eternal penance, the lost sinner, the first of the four. The cat Shalkwar offered a cryptic clue to her identity. Her sin, the cat explained, was one of monumental hubris. She was a fool who had tried to relight the first flame. This was a transgression committed only once before, a failure so profound it had birthed chaos itself. The evidence was undeniable. The soul burning within the sinner was the old witch soul, a direct echo of the Witch of Izalith. Worse, a chaos bug, a creature born of that ancient disaster, clung to her, a parasite of sin. This was not the witch herself, but her legacy, her failure, given new form. The sinner was a vessel for that ancient soul, trapped in a cycle of self-flagellation, forever attempting to atone for a sin that could never be undone. The hunt for the next great soul led the bearer of the curse not to a ruined castle or a forgotten city, but down into the very bowels of the earth. Beneath the cliffs of Magilla, a great pit yawned open, the gutter. It was a vertical slum, a shanty town built from the refuse and decay of the world above, a final destination for all that had been discarded. The descent continued into the Black Gulch, a lightless cavern slick with tar and poison. Lurking in this final darkness was the second of the old ones, the rotten. It was not a singular being, but a grotesque amalgamation, a monstrous collective forged from the countless bodies and forgotten souls that had been cast into the pit. It was the self-appointed god of this wretched domain, a shepherd of filth and forgotten things, offering a final, gruesome embrace to the lost. When this creature was finally brought down, the soul it relinquished was the old dead one soul, a name that carried the weight of ages. It was a clear echo of a far more ancient power, a whisper of a time when the first of the dead held dominion over a realm of shadow and bone, his essence now recycled and twisted by the endless turning of the cycle. The trail of the third great soul led to a familiar tragedy, the sunken, smoldering fortress of the old Iron King. The bearer of the curse journeyed into that realm of ash and iron, a cautionary tale of ambition already told. There, within the molten heart of his keep, they faced the king himself. But the king was no longer a man, but a demonic effigy of iron and flame, a creature born of his own hubris. The soul he yielded was a testament to his fall, a relic of a king who, in his lust for power, had been consumed by the very earth he sought to command. The last of the 4 beacons shone from Brightstone Cove Tseldora, a place that was not a kingdom, but a monument to one man's quiet madness. Duke Tseldora had built his fortune mining the cove's luminous crystals, but his true passion was for spiders. When the inevitable infestation came, when a chittering plague of arachnids overran his settlement, the Duke did not despair. He simply watched, perhaps in contentment, as his obsession devoured his creation. The bearer of the curse found the town entombed in silken shrouds, its streets patrolled by skittering legs, with a desperate company of soldiers camped at its border, tasked with containing the nightmare within. The source of the blight was deep inside the mines, in a chamber dominated by a monstrous, 2-headed spider that nested within the hollowed-out corpse of an ancient dragon. This was the Duke's dear Freya, and with her demise, the quartet of souls was complete. Returning to the Emerald Herald, the bearer of the curse presented the proof of their deeds. The herald affirmed that their journey's first chapter was closed. The combined power of the souls they now carried would act as a key, unsealing the ancient path through the Shrine of Winter and opening the way to the royal capital. The halls of Drangleic Castle were a testament to a stolen power, a kingdom built by the hands of soulless golems, animated by an unknown force. At its apex, the bearer of the curse was granted an audience with the queen, Nashendra. With a veneer of royalty hiding the abyss within, she spun a tale of a withered king who had abandoned his duty and urged the traveler to seek him out. It was a calculated deception. The queen craved the power of the throne of want, a seat of ultimate authority that Vendrick, in a final act of foresight, had sealed beyond her reach. To break that seal, she needed the king's ring, and she saw in this undead a pawn capable of retrieving it for her. But the king's path was not undefended. The looking glass knight, a sentinel of mirrored steel, stood as the first guardian of Vendrick's final gambit, a test the bearer of the curse was forced to overcome. The path to the exiled king was a pilgrimage through sorrow, leading into the waterlogged shrine of Amana. This sacred place was a strange confluence of cultures, where the Milfinito sang a constant, haunting lullaby for the dead, their voices a balm for the souls lost to the dark. But the shrine was also a prison. Deeper within its waters lurked the demon of song, a nightmare of flesh and hunger, cloaked in a beautiful facade, another obstacle on this grim journey. Beyond it lay the undead crypt, the final resting place of a kingdom. Here, between the traveler and their goal, stood the last bastion of loyalty, Velstadt, the royal aegis. Once one of two arms of the king, he alone had remained true when his brother in arms, Rame, fell to betrayal. But ages spent guarding this tomb had steeped Velstadt's soul in the profound darkness of the crypt, a power he unleashed in his final, desperate defense of his master. With the guardian defeated, the path to the king was clear. But the king was a king no longer. He was a mindless giant, divested of crown and reason, endlessly circling his own tomb. The true prize was not an audience, but an object, the king's ring, retrieved from the shell of a man who had lost everything. This ring was the master key to the kingdom's final secrets, unsealing the path to both the throne of want and the forbidden laboratory of Aldia's keep. The throne, however, remained inaccessible, rejecting the claimant. Power alone was not enough, understanding was required. And so, the bearer of the curse turned to the second door, entering the manor of the king's estranged brother. Within its walls was the evidence of Aldia's heretical work, a lifetime of research dedicated not to ruling the cycle, but to breaking it. The trail of this obsession led from the keep's unsettling experiments to the Dragon Eyrie, a mountain sanctuary where the living results of his research, drakes and dragons, flew free, strangely revered by human pilgrims who had come to worship these artificial gods. The path was challenged not by a beast, but by a disembodied will, the scholar of the first sin. This was Aldia, the king's brother, a mind that had untethered itself from flesh in its search for an escape. He had shadowed the traveler's steps, a silent observer of their adherence to the cycle. Aldia's obsession was singular, to shatter the repeating pattern of the ages. He laid the blame for this cosmic prison at the feet of the first sin, Gwyn's original linking of the flame, an act he saw not as a noble sacrifice, but as the moment that condemned existence to this endless return. His heretical experiments, his twisting of giants into facsimiles of dragons, was a desperate attempt to look beyond this prison. He sought to recreate the one form of life that had existed before the cycle began, the everlasting dragons, beings of permanence in a world now defined by change. And so, he posed a series of questions that sought to dismantle the very purpose of the traveler's journey. He spoke not of good or evil, but of futility. He challenged the perceived dichotomy of the world, asking what meaning could be found in linking the fire or embracing the dark, when both were merely two sides of the same counterfeit coin, destined to be flipped again and again for eternity. What value is there in choosing a path, he asked, when both lead back to the beginning of the same fate? At the summit of the dragon Eyrie, the bearer of the curse found the culmination of Aldia's work, a living, breathing ancient dragon. But this was not a true child of the age of ancients. It was a counterfeit, a hollow replica sculpted from the soul of a giant, a monument to one man's obsession with escaping the cycle. Yet, from this artifice came a profound power. Its defeat yielded the ashen mist heart, a key not to a place, but to time itself, granting the ability to step into the fading memories of the dead. Armed with this artifact, the past was no longer a story, but a destination. The bearer of the curse returned to the forest of fallen giants and stepped into the memories of the colossal corpses. They witnessed the brutal war not as a historian, but as a participant. In the memory of the giant lord, as he laid siege to a fortress, the bearer came face to face with a familiar foe. The towering figure leading the assault was the same being they had encountered chained and broken beneath the fortress, the one known as the last giant. In that moment, the loop of history closed. The bearer of the curse was the nameless hero from the legends, the one who struck down the giant lord and ended the war. They were not just following history, they were creating it. This act, a paradox of time, bestowed the giant's kinship, a resonance with the golems that guarded the final throne, the true key to claiming power. With the past now a part of them, the bearer of the curse returned to the throne of want. The final guardians, the throne watcher and defender, fell. The path was clear, and in that moment of victory, the queen's deception fell away. Nashendra revealed her true form, not a queen, but a grotesque embodiment of pure want, the shard of Manus that craved only power. She had used the bearer as a key, a tool to clear the path to the one thing her fragmented soul desired. But the tool had grown too powerful. The bearer of the curse, now swollen with the souls of the old and the strength of giants, cast her back into the abyss that spawned her. The queen's defeat was not the end. Aldia materialized one last time, not as an enemy, but as a final question given form. "The throne will receive you," he stated. "But what is it that you truly want? Light, dark, or something else entirely?" The choice was now absolute. The giant's kinship commanded the golems to form a bridge to the seat of power. One path was to sit upon it, to become the next monarch, and to perpetuate the cycle by choosing to either link the flame or let it fade into an age of dark. The other path was Aldia's. To refuse the throne, to reject the false dichotomy of light and dark, and to walk away from the cycle altogether, into an unknown future beyond its prison. The grand legend of the flame is a lie, or at least a truth that is worn thin with repetition. The world is not reborn with each linking of the fire. It is merely preserved in its own decay. With every cycle, the shadows recede to reveal a world more scarred and hollow than the one before. Reality itself grows thin, like a memory on the verge of being forgotten. And in its final, desperate moments, the flame ceases to be a source of life. It becomes a predator, a bottomless hunger that feeds on the very souls it once sustained. For ages, the pattern held. A champion would rise, offer themselves as kindling to the dying embers, and in that sacrifice, become a lord of cinder, holding the tide of the undead curse at bay. But in this final, fading age, the system has failed. A great bell tolls across the lands, a summons for 4 of the old lords to return to their thrones and sacrifice themselves once more. They have refused. The agony of self-immolation is a price they are unwilling to pay a second time. Of the old guard, only Ludleth of Curland, a king in body but a giant in will, remains at his post, ready to fulfill his duty. When the heroes refuse the call, the bell tolls for the failures. It awakens the ashen ones, beings who long ago attempted to link the flame but lacked the strength, burning to mere ash instead of becoming true lords. One such being, the unkindled, is given a singular, grim purpose: to hunt down the apostate lords and drag them, by force if necessary, back to their ceremonial thrones to be consumed. It is a hopeless task, for these are not mere kings, but demigods who have profound and personal reasons for letting the world die. The unkindled's hunt is for the apostate kings, the lords who have forsaken their oaths. The first, Aldrich, is a perversion of piety. He was a cleric whose faith was replaced by a bottomless hunger, a gluttony that led him to the cannibalism of men. This diet of souls bloated his form into a monstrous, living sludge, but it also made him powerful. So powerful, in fact, that he was offered to the first flame not as a hero, but as a potent sacrifice. Now, awakened by the bell, he has not returned to his throne. He has journeyed to the dead city of Anorlando, not as a pilgrim, but as a parasite, slowly devouring the last of the gods. The second, Yorm the Giant, is a monument to failed sacrifice. He was the reclusive king of the profaned capital, a warrior who wrestled with 2 fires. His selfless act of linking the first flame triggered the other, the profaned flame, which erupted and scoured his own capital from the earth, melting the flesh from the bones of the people he had sworn to protect. He is a king of ashes, a solitary giant whose greatest act of heroism was also his most profound failure. The third, the Abyss Watchers, are not one man, but a single soul shared across a legion. They are the inheritors of Artorius's will, a brotherhood of warriors bound by wolf's blood to a singular, fanatical purpose: to contain the abyss. So absolute, is their crusade against the dark, that they would burn entire nations to the ground at the mere rumor of its taint. Finally, there is Prince Lothric, the one who was meant to be the greatest lord of all, and who chose to be nothing. He is not truly a lord of cinder, for he never linked the flame. He is the product of a corrupted royal line, a being engineered through generations of forbidden rites for the sole purpose of becoming perfect kindling. But a heretical scholar taught him the truth of the cycle, its futility, its endless repetition. And so, he has rejected his destiny. Alongside his loyal brother Lorien, he has locked himself away in the highest towers of his castle, content to sit and watch the flame, and the world with it, finally die out. The road ahead would be a trial by fire. After rising from a forgotten grave and felling the Ashen Judge, the first of many guardians on this path, the unkindled one found their way to the desolate comfort of Firelink's shrine. There, the blind firekeeper gave voice to their mission, a charge as cold and grim as the dying age itself. If the lords would not return to their thrones, they would return as cinders. And so the hunt began, a pilgrimage to the far-flung sanctuaries where the apostate lords had taken refuge. The trail started at the Cathedral of the Deep, the last known domain of Aldrich. But the Saint of the Deep was long gone, his sanctum occupied only by his devout followers. It was there, kneeling in a forgotten chapel, that the unkindled one found a detour from their quest. A hunched, desperate figure named Gale begged them for a boon, a sliver of fire for his lady. She was trapped, he explained, within the painted world of Ariandel, and could not paint a new world until she had witnessed flame. A single touch of the canvas scrap Gale carried was all it took. The world dissolved, and the unkindled was pulled into a different reality. This was a world consumed by a gentle, pervasive rot. Unlike the world outside, the painting embraced its own end. Its natural cycle was one of decay, followed by a cleansing fire that would burn the old world away to make a fresh canvas for a new creation. But this natural order had been corrupted by an outsider, a woman named Sister Freed, an apostate from the Sable Church of Londor, a faith dedicated to ushering in an age of man. Freed had paradoxically imposed the very stasis she once fought against. She had manipulated the painting's guardian, Father Ariandel, convincing him to defy the cycle. He sits now in the depths of the chapel, endlessly scourging himself, feeding the flame his own blood, not to cleanse the world, but to keep it from burning. The unkindled one found Gale's lady, the painter, a young girl held captive by Freed's will. The girl's story confirmed the truth of the painting. She could not begin her creation until the old one was consumed by fire. To break the stasis, the unkindled confronted the painting's corrupt guardians. The battle that followed was a grueling war of attrition against Freed, who returned from death with a chilling resolve, and the tormented Ariandel. But in the end, they were defeated. With them gone, the sacred blood no longer fed the flame. The fire was freed. The slow, cleansing cleansing burn of the old world began. The painter, now liberated, offered her thanks. She had seen the flame. Now, she needed only the pigment for her new world, the dark soul of man, a material her Uncle Gale had set out to find. With their strange detour complete, the unkindled returned to their own world, only to find that Gale was nowhere to be found. With the painting set on its natural course, the hunt for the lords resumed. The unkindled journeyed to the cold, dead city of Anorlando. There, in the former Hall of the Gods, they found Aldrich, a writhing mass of sludge, in the very act of consuming the last of them, Gwyndolin, the Dark Moon god. There was no reasoning with the creature. It was a being of pure hunger. The unkindled put an end to its feast and took the cinders of a lord who would not return. The story repeated itself in the profaned capital, where the giant Yorm sat in his lonely throne room, a king of ash. It repeated itself in Farron Keep, where the Abyss Watchers, now corrupted by the very thing they fought, were locked in an endless, fratricidal battle. All refused the call. All were reduced to ash. The final confrontation took place in the highest spires of Lothric Castle. The unkindled one faced the twin princes, Lothric and his brother Lorien. But the young prince met their challenge not with aggression, but with a quiet, nihilistic resolve. He had no interest in the ancient duty, no desire to burn for a world he believed should be allowed to die. The battle that ensued was not for a throne, but over the fate of reality itself. Though the brothers fought as one, a formidable duo of magic and steel, they were no match for the Ashen One's purpose. They too became cinders for the fading flame. With the ashes of the lords in hand, the unkindled one began the journey back to Firelink's shrine. But a strange, sorrowful cry echoing from a forgotten wing of the castle drew them from their path. In a desecrated garden, they found the source, a withered, half-draconic creature, a pathetic echo of the ancient dragon Seath. It clutched at the empty air, cradling a child that was not there. This was Useres, the former king of Lothric. He was the architect of his son's tragic destiny, a man whose obsession with creating a worthy heir had led him down the forbidden paths of Seath's own research. He sought to infuse his bloodline with the power of dragons, a quest that twisted his own body and mind. The result of his madness was a half-breed infant, Oslot, born to Lothric's queen shortly before her disappearance. Now, at the twilight of his age, the king had lost everything. His sight was gone, his humanity forfeit, his queen vanished, and it seemed his precious, monstrous child was lost as well. Lost in his own delusions, he perceived the unkindled one as a threat, lashing out to protect an heir that was only a phantom. He pleaded with the invisible Oslot to hide, his voice a strange mix of paternal love and reptilian madness. Then, midway through the battle, something in his broken mind snapped. He roared the child's name, raised the arm that seemed to hold it, and brought it down with a sickening, final crunch. whether the child was ever truly there, or if this was merely the final act of a king's insanity, is a question that died with him. Its only answer the faint sound of a baby's cry that lingered in the air long after Useres fell silent. The Ashen One had succeeded where all others had failed, but the victory over Useres was a hollow one. The king had already lost his mind, his kingdom, and his humanity long before the final blow fell. The path beyond his profane garden led through a silent corridor littered with the corpses of serpent men, a final, grim testament to his heresy. It opened not into a new land, but into a dark echo of the past, the cemetery of ash, now known as the untended graves. In the final days of a dying world, time itself unravels. It was impossible to know if this was a glimpse of a lightless past, a premonition of a future where the flame had already died, or simply a place where two identical realities had bled into one another. It was the very land where the unkindled one had first risen, but now it was trapped in an unbroken night, its hollows replaced by the wretched, feathered forms of Corvians. In the gloom, a familiar grave, their own, sat open and empty. Here, a gift had been left across the ages, the ashen Estus ring, placed by Lothric's forgotten queen for a champion she would never know. In the arena where the unkindled had once faced the petrified Eudex Gundyr, a different figure stood guard. This was Gundyr as he was meant to be, not a judge, but a champion. Unburdened by the coiled sword, uncorrupted by the pus of man, this was a warrior in his prime. The tragedy of his story was written in the world around him. He was a hero who had arrived too late. He had fought his way to Firelink's shrine, only to find the fire already extinguished, the bell silent, and the world he was meant to save already lost to darkness. He was another failed heir, a champion whose time had passed before it ever began. And like all the others who stood in the way of this age's final act, he met his end at the hands of the unkindled ash. Beyond the arena of the fallen champion, the path twisted through familiar geography, a mirror image of the unkindled's first steps, but patrolled now by the grim, eternal sentinels of the Black Knights. It led, inexorably, to the final, chilling copy, a Firelink shrine where the central bonfire had long been extinguished. In this dark double, the unkindled found a discovery of immense consequence, the eyes of a firekeeper. They carried these forbidden relics back to their own Firelink shrine. The firekeeper recoiled, explaining that for her kind, eyes were heresy, showing visions of betrayal and a world utterly devoid of light. Yet the unkindled, having witnessed the painted world's natural cycle, may have seen the logic in that absolute end. The firekeeper, sensing their will to stop the repetition, agreed to hold the eyes. They would share a secret, the grand betrayal, until the final moment. She warned the unkindled one that should their resolve falter, they must kill her and reclaim the eyes, lest she be corrupted by the dark they revealed. The eyes showed her a vast, eternal blackness, a world without fire. But this was not the empty void she had always perceived. In that profound darkness, she saw the faint, delicate presence of tiny, distant flames, embers left by lords of cinder long past. The great task was complete. The unkindled and the firekeeper placed the collected cinders upon their thrones. The firekeeper then began the ancient ritual to open the path to the kiln. That ritual complete, the world warped. The unkindled presented themselves at the nexus of the flame's final power. They walked through a landscape of scorching wind and the charred corpses of those who had come before. Yet, through the swirling ash, a second bonfire glowed faintly, a beacon to a different path, a secret, ulterior end to the mission. That second bonfire led not to the kiln, but to a different kind of end. The Ashen One was now in a place of final decay, a strange soot clinging to their very skin. An ancient woman, a pilgrim at the end of a very long road, offered them a simple token, a final gesture of aid for the journey into the drag heap. This is the place where all timelines collapse. It is the bottom of the world, a cosmic landfill where the wreckage of Lordran, Lothric, and countless other forgotten kingdoms have piled up at the end of time. It is a nauseating slurry of fractured geographies and collapsing ages, all churning together toward a final, singular point. They say this is where the dregs of souls, the last, useless residue left over after a soul has been completely hollowed, finally settle. The monstrous, degenerate beings that inhabit this ruin are formed from that very sediment. The unkindled ash pressed on, following the trail left by the vanished gale. The path led through a landscape populated by beings of pure avarice, human-shaped dregs, animated by an instinctual need to consume what little humanity remained in the world. The journey through this collapsing reality led to the ruins of a primordial firelink shrine, where two demon princes, the last of their kind, stood as guardians. With them defeated, the Ashen One unfurled a tattered banner. The signal was answered by the winged demons of old, the same couriers who once carried a chosen hero to Anor Londo. They now carried this final champion across the ash-choked abyss to the last city at the end of the world, the Ringed City. It stood as a monument of impossible architecture, a city built on the edge of nothingness. But its grandeur was a deception. It was not a testament to civilization, but a prison. A beautiful, intricate cage built to contain a secret so profound that it had to be hidden at the end of time itself. The unkindled did not know the nature of this secret. They only knew that Gale had come here to find it, and that they must follow. Even at the city's entrance, its true nature as a prison was palpable. A strange lethargy seeped into the mind, a dulling of thought, as the soft toll of a distant bell echoed through the air. The city's defenses were not of stone and steel, but of spirit. Silent judges and executioners stood guard, summoning the phantoms of long dead nights to repel intruders. As the unkindled pressed deeper, time seemed to stretch and compress. The city's geography was a labyrinth of collapsing ages. The creatures of the abyss that lurked in its swamps were not merely hostile, they were ravenous, starved by an eternity of confinement. Sunken churches, their altars now home to grotesque, preaching locusts, spoke of a faith that had rotted from the inside out. And then came the roar. It was the sound of a power that predated the gods themselves, the cry of a true, everlasting dragon. This was Midir. He was a relic of the ancient war, a dragon raised by the gods themselves in the aftermath of their victory. While his peer, Seath the Scaleless, had been granted a dukedom for his betrayal, Midir had been given a duty. He was tasked with an eternal vigil, an endless, thankless war against the creeping dark of the abyss. For untold ages, he had held his post, a perfect, incorruptible guardian. But at the end of all things, even the eternal can break. Midir, after a lifetime of fighting the abyss, had finally begun to be consumed by it. And here, in the final bastion of the old world, a warrior knight named Shira, a descendant of the gods, served as the last protector of the city's great secret, Filianor, Gwyn's youngest daughter, the silent warden of the cage. After a tense encounter with the knight Shira, the unkindled pressed on, navigating the city's treacherous, collapsing infrastructure. Upon a windswept cliff, they met Midir again, no longer a distant roar, but a terrifying, immediate presence. It was here, in the darkest depths of the ringed city swamp, that the finality of the world's decay was most apparent. The darkness was a living thing, a lonely, consuming hunger, and the path was lit only by the faint glow of the soul dregs that were its food. Here, the unkindled found the truth that Shira herself had been seeking. The great dragon Midir had fallen. After an eternity of battling the abyss, he had been corrupted by it, his ancient form now twisted by the very darkness he was sworn to contain. It was the same tragic story as Artoria's, a hero consumed by his own crusade. The lesson was as clear as it was grim. Nothing can hold back the dark forever. No wall, no prison, no champion is eternal. The abyss will always seep through the cracks. Midir's long, thankless vigil was over. He was no longer a guardian, but another prisoner of the dark. Seeing this, the unkindled one charged forward, not to slay a monster, but to grant a final mercy, to release the ancient dragon from a duty that had become a curse. For what are the Ashen Ones, if not agents of an end? They are the embers that remain when the great fire has gone out, their purpose not to rebuild the old world, but to clear the way for whatever comes next. At last, at the highest point of the ringed city, in a silent, sunlit spire, the unkindled found the heart of the prison. Here, a woman slept on a throne wreathed in shadow. This was Filianor, Gwyn's youngest daughter, the city's secret warden. Her slumber was a seal, a spell that held the city outside of time, preserving the cage and its prisoners in an endless, stagnant present. She wept tears of darkness in her sleep, a princess dreaming at the end of the world. Nestled in her arms was a brittle, translucent egg. As the unkindled reached out to touch it, the fragile shell disintegrated into dust. The spell was broken. Filianor stirred, a faint smile gracing her lips as the long illusion she had maintained finally gave way. A torrent of white light erupted, the raw, unbound force of countless ages of deferred time washing over everything at once. When the light faded, the truth of the world was laid bare. The Ashen One stood in the same spot, but Filianor was now a withered corpse, her duty fulfilled and her life forfeit. The grand, timeless city was gone, its illusion shattered. All that remained was a vast, gray wasteland, an endless desert of ash under a dying sun. This was the world as it truly was, a final, desolate landscape where the ruins of every kingdom that had ever been were now just indistinguishable piles of dust. The tragedy of Filianor is one of the most profound in this age of sorrows. She was not a queen, but a sacrifice, a daughter given away by her own father, Gwyn, to serve as the eternal warden of his greatest fear. The egg she held was a lock, a delicate seal that kept the pygmy lords, the progenitors of humanity, and their dark soul trapped at the end of time. She was condemned to an endless, waking dream, a prisoner of her own duty. Now, with her death, that duty was over. From the ruins of her tower, the unkindled one stepped out into the true reality, an endless desert of ash, the final graveyard of all the world's kingdoms. In this desolate expanse, a single, withered figure crawled through the dust. It was one of the pygmy lords, his ancient form now frail and pathetic, crying out Filianor's name in terror. He was fleeing the Red Hood, a thing of pure hunger that sought his, and every dark soul. The unkindled followed the trail of the pygmies' desperate flight to the ruins of a great throne room. There, the identity of the Red Hood was revealed. It was Gale. He was hunched over the desiccated corpse of a pygmy lord, consuming the last dregs of its soul. The quest for the pigment had broken him. He had become a monster, a slave to the insatiable power of the dark soul he had consumed. He turned to the unkindled, his mind gone, demanding their fragment of the dark soul for his lady's painting. Here, at the very ends of the world, two undead souls battling over a mere sliver of darkness, while the fate of all creation is at the very brink of its existence. The unkindled one, now a being of immense strength, finally put the tormented Gale to rest, and from his corpse they claimed his prize, the blood of the dark soul. The question of Gale's final moments is a tragedy with two faces. Was he simply another victim of the abyss, his mind and soul devoured by a lust for the power he consumed? Or was his monstrosity a final, calculated act of sacrifice? Perhaps he understood in the end that the blood of the long-faded pygmy lords was too thin, too weak to serve as a proper pigment. And so, he became the vessel himself. He gathered the entirety of the dark soul into his own being, knowing that only a champion of ash would have the strength to fell him and claim the true, potent color needed for his lady's new world. In this, he was not a monster, but a martyr. The unkindled one returned to the painted world to find it in its final, beautiful throes. The old, rotting canvas was being consumed by the cleansing flame. Amidst this inferno, they found the painter and gave her the blood of the dark soul. And as the old world burned away around her, she began to paint the new. From the very essence of humanity, she brought forth a different kind of reality, a quiet, gentle place of cold and dark. It was not another age of fire or of gods, but something else entirely. A fragile hope painted on the ashes of the old. With their promise kept, the Ashen One left that nascent world behind and journeyed to the heart of the cycle, the kiln of the first flame. There, they faced the final guardian, the soul of Cinder, not a king or a god, but the very will of the flame itself, an amalgamation of every soul that had ever linked it. With the cycle's last defender defeated, the final choice was made. The unkindled summoned the fire keeper to the embers of the world. She came, and with gentle, solemn hands, she took the first flame into herself, cradling the dying god of an age as one would a fading spark. Together, they watched as the light of the world was extinguished, and a true, profound darkness fell. But in that final blackness, as she had foreseen, there was not emptiness. Far in the distance, like new stars in a new night sky, tiny flames flickered, the embers of a world that was, or perhaps the seeds of a world yet to be. As the age of fire finally passed into memory, a single voice in the silence. Ashen One, hearest thou my voice still?